All right, everybody. I've gotten the green light. We're going to get this thing kicked off. All right. So, how many of you, raise your hand if you were at yesterday's session. It's just for recording, so it's not. I'm gonna speak loud, but this is just for the recording. So it's not supposed to amplify my voice. This is just for if anybody wants to listen or watch the session afterwards. All right. So most of you were not here for yesterday's session, so I'm gonna give a very quick recap and try to bring you up to speed. Here's what I'm gonna try to give you today. At the end of this session today, I want to show you how to build a one-page financial plan for yourself. And if you'll follow this framework, you will be so far ahead of where most people are with their financial management. What we talked about yesterday is, wouldn't it be great if you could make your money go farther? I talked about how you come in here from the States, the exchange rate to Australian dollars is really good for US. $1 US is 150 Australian. So for me, I feel like I'm going around and everything that I see, if it's $30, for me it's $20. So it feels like my money is going a lot further. But in your own life, in your own finances, wouldn't it be great if you felt like you were getting more for your money? You were getting more value. Not necessarily more money, although I think all of us would say, oh, that'd be great. But how do I make more impact? How does my money go farther? And if you'll use this template, if you'll use this framework, it'll really help you to have a great attitude around how you see your finances, but then also making sure that your use of money aligns with what is actually really important. So here's what we started with yesterday. You have to understand, first of all, what the Bible says about money. And the Bible says that everything belongs to God. Not just all the physical resources that are out there, but even your abilities. Even the fact that you have time and energy and skill and smarts and all the things that allow you to go out and to make money, that all comes from God. So just like God has given you those things, he could take it away from you. So we got to be careful about getting really prideful and being self-reliant and thinking, oh, I'm so great, I'm so wonderful, I'm so smart, I'm so talented and accomplished. Really, all of that ultimately comes from God. But because of that, it means that we are the managers. We talk about stewardship. So God's the true owner. We're a steward, we're a manager, which means we're entrusted with something that doesn't actually belong to us, and therefore we're accountable for that. So that means we can't have this attitude of, hey, it's my money, I worked for it, I earned it, so I could do whatever I want with it. I don't answer to anybody. No, all of us have to answer to God for how we use our time, how we use our abilities, and how we use our financial resources. So that built up to where we spent a good bit of time in yesterday's session talking about building a financial why statement. I'm going to use the board here a little bit as well because I want to illustrate for you on the board what this looks like. So as part of your one-page financial plan, first of all, you need to have a financial why statement. And I gave you my financial why statement. In fact, yesterday we talked about some really good questions, deep questions that we have to ask ourselves, to be honest with ourselves, because all progress starts with telling the truth, to get to the bottom of why money is important. What role do you want money to play in your own life? So if you were not here yesterday, I really, really want you to go back and listen or watch yesterday's session. Get the notes from that if you can, and go through those questions to help you determine a statement. My financial why statement is to have a flexible schedule, I'm going to try to fit everything on here if I can. Have a flexible schedule, travel with my family, and be generous with my time and money. That's my financial why statement. And I think all of you, and I would encourage all of you to develop your own financial why statement. The role of money in my life is to, and fill in that blank, and try to summarize it into a sentence if you can. And this is going to be a great shortcut, a great way to evaluate important financial decisions in your life. That's where we stopped yesterday. So we need to pick it up from here. The next part of this plan is now to develop goals. So at the top of your one-page plan, you have a financial why statement. Here's why money is important to me. Here's the role that I want money to play in my life. Now we have to develop some goals. If I were to ask you this morning, All right, quick, what are your financial goals? There'd be a little bit of a panicked response. I don't know, right? You just kind of go with whatever sounds good. Maybe something that you heard somebody else say. We don't know what our financial goals are. We're not good at coming up with financial goals, right? Our goals should stem from our financial why statement. So once you're really clear about what you want, the role that you want money to play in your life, then you can start to develop some goals. So for instance, just as an example here, if one of the things that I say here is I want to travel with my family, well, one of my goals might be save X number of dollars per month into a separate savings account so that I can buy flights and pay for a hotel and do, right? Okay, if that's a goal, if that's something that's important to me, that's something I want to prioritize, then that might be a goal. By the way, when it comes to goals, let me give you a good framework for this. Goals should be SMART, S-M-A-R-T. They should be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-oriented. I'll get out of the way so you can write that down if you want to. Specific, okay, not general, not, I want to retire early. That's not specific. Measurable, okay, in dollar amounts, like specifically, how much, when, where. Actionable, this is something that I can do right now. This is not something, maybe one day I'll do this. No, what can I do right now? Realistic, is it's actually within my ability to do. This is not something that's fantasy. And time-oriented, when am I going to do it? So for instance, instead of saying, I want to retire early, that's not a good financial goal. Instead, you might say, my goal is to talk to my HR department, and by the end of this month, I'm going to start putting 10% of my pay in my super fund. Okay? That would be a SMART goal. Instead of saying, well, I want to get out of debt. That's not a goal, or at least that's not a very well-defined goal. Instead, a much better goal would be, I'm going to start paying $300 a month extra on my credit card so I can have it paid off in full by the end of this year. See what I'm saying? So your goals stem from your financial why statement. I would recommend that you have anywhere from 3 to 5 goals, no more than that. You say, why no more than that? Because human nature. If you list 15 goals for yourself, it's not happening. Okay, I'm just telling you, based on human behavior, that we're not very good at creating a laundry list and then boom, 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 doing every single thing. Find the most, prioritize and find what are the 3, 4, 5 things that are most important, that are most pressing, that I can start doing right now. In our last session, the guys, you just heard Peter talk about, when it comes to God's will, it's not about God giving you the entire roadmap, it's about taking the next best step. So when it comes to financial planning, when I'm trying to help people with financial planning, that's a lot of times what people want. They want me to create this great map and show them the next 30 years and exactly how it's going to unfold. The problem is nobody knows. I don't know what the next 30 years are going to hold, neither do you. Instead, let's get out the compass and let's find north, let's find the direction that we want to go, and let's just start taking steps in that direction. And we'll go down the road a little bit. Okay, we'll wander through the wilderness, and then we'll stop again, and then we'll reorient ourselves, and we'll get back pointing in the right direction. That's really what we're talking about here. So what's the next best thing that I can do? I told you yesterday I love history, so I'm going to give you a quick history example. Back in the early 1900s, there was a race to see who could be the first person to reach the South Pole. It's one of the few places left on Earth that no person had actually visited. And there were 2 expeditions that were going at the same time, kind of a David and Goliath story. You had the British expedition led by Robert Scott, and they had everything. All the prestige, they had all great backing, great funding, a ton of people that were part of the project, all the equipment. And then you had this other expedition, a Norwegian expedition led by Roald Amundsen, and there was a very simple, just 19 guys and some dog sled teams and really nothing fancy. And what happened is Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian team, beat Robert Scott by 5 weeks to the South Pole. And it's a really amazing story. Bottom line is, how did David beat Goliath in that situation? Well, the way it turns out is Robert Scott's expedition, they were so confident and they were so They overextended themselves to such a degree that they didn't just want to be the first ones to reach the South Pole. They wanted to do a bunch of other stuff too. They wanted to do all this scientific experimentation. They brought all this equipment with them. They were going to do all these things while they were there in Antarctica. And then they wanted to do it the right way to show the British grit and tenacity that we do things the right way. We're real men. We're not going to use dog sled teams the whole way. That's almost like cheating. We're going to pull our sleds by hand. And it was stupid. Because what they found is that by trying to do a million things at once, they failed at the thing that was most important, the thing that they actually set out to do in the first place. And tragically, Robert Scott actually died on the way back from the South Pole. He reached the South Pole, realized the Norwegians had gotten there, and they didn't have enough supplies to even make it back. It's just, the whole story is an amazing story if you ever get a chance to look into it and learn about it a little bit more. What I take away from that, though, is when it comes to our finances, we can be guilty of the same thing. We're trying to juggle a million things at once, and we need to get really clear about what's the most important thing. At the end of it all, sure, there's a million things that we could be doing. I could be paying for a car, and I could be, living in the place that I really want to live, and take all these trips and go out with friends. And there's all these things that I could be doing with my money. But ultimately, what is most important? Make sure that I don't miss that in all of the chaos and all the things that are going on. Okay, so in the story Alice in Wonderland, if you remember that, if you ever read that book or watched the movie as a kid, there's a part where Alice is lost, and she comes across the Cheshire Cat. And she says, "Please, sir, will you tell me which way to go?" And the Cheshire Cat says, "Well, that depends a great deal on where you want to get to." And Alice thinks for a second. She says, "Well, I don't really care much where." And the Cheshire Cat says, "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," right? Like, if we don't know where we're going, if we don't have a good sense of direction in our mind for what we want our money to do, then we're just going to be on this treadmill of constantly finding ourselves falling short and getting frustrated in the process, okay? Now, maybe you were thinking coming to the finance sessions, at some point we're going to talk about budgeting. And you're like, I really hope he doesn't talk about budgeting, because that's like, here's why I think a lot of us struggle. Maybe you've tried to budget before. Maybe you've never budgeted before. I think the reason a lot of times people get frustrated with budgeting is they're viewing it the exact wrong way. They view a budget as a punishment. Like, I've been bad with money, now I'm going to get slapped on the wrist and say, you've been bad, now you have to go on a budget as a punishment for being bad with money. Like, almost like being put in financial jail. Like, I have to be on this stupid budget. It's like probation. That's not what a budget should be. A budget should be a framework. Maybe you want to think of it, instead of using the term budget, you can use the term a spending plan. Really what a budget is a framework to making sure that your money is going towards the things that you want to prioritize. So I'm going to show you something here in a second, a kind of a cash flow system, not necessarily a budget, but more of a cash flow system or a way to think about your cash flow that I think will help you for many, many years to come. And we're going to take a lot of notes on that. Okay, so on your handout, if you've got the handout, all of your money goes into one of the following 4 buckets, okay? All of your money, all of your income from all of the sources is going to go into one of these 4 buckets. And here they are. Okay? Give, live, owe, grow. All of your money ends up in one of those 4 buckets. Give, live, owe, grow. Easy to remember. It comes from a book, Master Your Money by Ron Blue. In fact, at the end of your handout, there's a little recommended reading spot. And it is a great book. It's written by an American, so a lot of the information in the book is a little bit more from an American's perspective as far as like specifics on money. But that framework of give, live, owe, grow is true across the board, and that's why I think it's really helpful, and I want to mention it today. Now, we're gonna deep dive in each 4 of these buckets and talk about them individually. But I want to just pause here for a second. If you will be able to do these 3 things in your 1-page financial plan, I'm telling you, you will go to the next level in your financial management. If you will take the time to be serious and honest with yourself and to develop a financial why statement, if you will develop SMART goals, 3 to 5 SMART goals, things that you can start doing right now that are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-oriented, and write them out. And then if you will figure out how much of your money is going into each of these 4 buckets, it will be a big eye-opener, and it will help you to know where you need to go next. Okay, so let's talk about give. There's a great, I was reading a book called Enough by Will Davis. He gives us this great story. He talks about, he lives in Texas, and nearby his house there's a reservoir. It's a lake, but it's, the lake, the water level rises and falls quite a bit because it's a reservoir that feeds into a river, and so sometimes, depending on dry season, rainy season, the water level will fluctuate quite a bit. And in the middle of the lake, there's this little island called Sometime Island. And depending on the water level, sometimes you can see it, but then when the water level is really high, then it's covered by the water. And so he said it's kind of like a joke with the locals. When the water level is low, sometimes people will go out there on their boats and they'll put for sale signs on Sometime Island, which of course the joke is, yeah, who would want to buy that island because sometimes it's covered with water. But he said what a great example of how temporary and fleeting money is. You know, our money is good for a very short time in a very specific place. But we're not taking it with us. That's why Randy Alcorn says you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. So everything that we have as far as financial means is only here for a short amount of time. But here's the amazing thing. The Bible says that when we give, when we exercise generosity, we are laying up treasure in heaven, that there is an eternal reward that we will enjoy someday that is eternal and permanent. So everything that we have here, it's going to go away someday, and it's going to go away soon. But every act of generosity is an eternal reward, an eternal treasure that will be enjoyed in heaven forever. When we think about it in that term, when we think about the perspective of that, we say, wow, why wouldn't I want to be generous? Why wouldn't I want to be long-sighted instead of short-sighted in my financial management? So let's talk about what the Bible says about giving. Or let me give you 3 statements here. Giving, first of all, number 1, giving is an act of worship. Giving is an act of worship. Did you know that? When we use the word worship, we usually use it in terms or in the context of like music, right? And certainly that's a very important aspect of worshiping the Lord. We worship him through song and through music. We also worship him through prayer, through the preaching of God's word, but we also worship God through giving. And we see that throughout the Bible. We see how the Philippians gave money to the Apostle Paul, and Paul said that money, even though that helped him financially, he said that was like, in God's eyes, that was like incense that's offered at the temple. That was like a sacrifice offered on the altar. In God's eyes, he received that as worship. Remember the wise men, when they came and found the young child Jesus? How did they worship him? They brought him gold and frankincense and myrrh, like really, really expensive and precious items, because they wanted to show how important and how valuable the Messiah is to them. Number 2, giving is an act of faith. So when we give, we're worshiping God. We're showing him how valuable he is to us, that we would give part of our financial resources to further his work. But then giving is an act of faith. What we're saying is, God, I believe that there's more to this life than just the here and now. Because, I mean, let's face it, if the Bible's not true and we're not going somewhere for all of eternity after this life, like this is all we get, then don't be generous. Just enjoy it, right? You get one shot at this thing, go live it up. Don't give money to the church, go buy yourself a new car. I mean, if that's the reality, but we don't believe that. We believe by faith that there is something better yet to come and that we are laying up treasure in heaven. So every time we give, we're exercising our faith to say, God, I believe that your word is true, and this is not the only life that there is. And then number 3, giving is an act of love. Giving is an act of love. You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. You can give to somebody and not truly love them, not truly care about them. But if you love somebody, you're going to give. You're going to give of your time, you're going to give of your emotions, and even of your financial resources when you truly love something. So when you love the Lord, when you love God, you want to say, man, I want to give a part of me, including my finances, to further your work here on earth. That's John 3:16, right? The most famous verse in the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave. He gave his only begotten Son. Now, when it comes to our give score, as I'll call it here, when it comes to measuring this, I've got there in your notes how to calculate your give score. So here's what I would encourage you to do. as part of this exercise, and you're not going to be able to do it all right here and now, so you're going to have to, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework, okay? But when you get some time here in the next few days, take some time, look at all your income, and figure out how much of your income is ending up in the give bucket. How do you do that? I've got it right there in your notes. Basically, just take whatever your church giving is. If you tithe, you give to missions, you give to offering, whatever that looks like, add that up, okay? Any other charitable giving, if you give to other projects outside of just your church, you can include that as well, all right? So add up, here's all my giving in the various different ways, and then how much is that per year? So if you give, and by the way, I'm just going to use a very simple example just for sake of the math here. I'm going to use an income of $100,000. You say, Nate, I don't make $100,000. That's not the point, okay? The point is it's easy math if I just use $100,000. So if somebody has a household income of $100,000, and let's say they added up all their giving for the year and it was $10,000, what would their give score be? Their give score would be 10%. Okay, does that make sense? You add up all your giving for the year, divide it by your income, and that tells you 10% of my income is ending up in the give bucket. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole like tithing versus grace giving. Here's the thing, folks. In the Old Testament, the Israelite people gave 10% of their income to the Lord. In America today, the average church-going Christian gives 3% of their income. So no matter whether you feel like the tithe is for the New Testament or grace giving, we should feel compelled to do better than 3%. Okay, I think we can all agree that that would be a good thing. That's between you and the Lord, but your give score tells you a lot about how you prioritize generosity, right? And if you're like, oh, Nate, actually, I don't know if I'm giving anything. Okay, well then the give score is 0, and that's something that's easy to bump up, right? But it's good to get a snapshot and say, okay, if generosity, if I say that's really important to me, how much of my money is actually ending up in that bucket? Let me give you some practical tips for increasing your giving score. First of all, automate your giving. Sometimes the reason we don't give is because we're waiting to see if we have any money left over to give. It's not going to work very well if you take that approach. Automate it. I'm sure your church, I'm sure just about any organization that you're going to give to has online giving. Set it up as a recurring transaction. Take the guesswork out of it. It's not even a question. I'm going to do it, set the date, here's the amount, and it just goes. Create a discretionary giving category. Okay, so you know how some people have like a fun money account, like for entertainment or for activities, like this is just for me to do stuff that I want to do with it. That's just kind of like a miscellaneous category. What about that for your giving? What if you just set aside $100 or $200 a month and said, this is my discretionary giving? So that like maybe I'm out to eat and I want to leave a good tip for the server, or I hear about so-and-so's having a birthday and I'm going to get them a gift card, or man, these people are going through a hard time and they have this GoFundMe and I can just put some money, and it's built into my budget where it's like, yeah, I've got the margin, I've got a discretionary giving account. I think that would be a great thing. Brainstorm creative ways to be generous with your time, skill, and attention. In this room, I understand most of you don't have a ton of money to just be like, oh yeah, I just have so much money, I don't know what to do with it all. Oh yeah, I could give it, okay? I understand that for a lot of you, it's like, yeah, money's tight, but what do you have? Some of the most generous people I've ever met were retirees who lived off of a government pension, a very small one. But they're generous, not because they gave lots of money, but they gave of what they had. Time, their attention, their care. You can write a note, you can send a text, you can go and visit somebody, you can volunteer, find ways to be a generous person. Generosity is not just a line item. It's not just a financial transaction. It's a way of life. And then number 4, increase giving proportionately as your income increases. You say, well, Nate, even if I gave 10%, that's not a lot right now because I don't have a lot of money. Okay. Well, as your income goes up, make sure that your giving increases proportionately, right? You get a raise. Okay, great. Now 10% of this raise, I'll be able to continue to give. All right, let's move on to live, our live score. What is that? Well, our live would be just like our basic spending, okay? Here's the thing with budgeting, with tracking. You've got to have a way to know where your money is going, okay? So find what works for you. I'm a little bit of a budgeting app agnostic, and what I mean by that is some people are very much like, you have to use this budgeting program, you have to use this budgeting system. Find what works for you, but make sure you're tracking your spending. if we're going to be a good manager of our money, we have to know where it's going. So many people have no clue where their money is going. It's really sad. They have no clue, no idea. They just look at what's in their bank account, and they're like, is there enough? Okay, I guess we're good now. Know where your money is going. So let me give you a few places that are helpful places to track your money. Every dollar, there's an app. You can access it on the computer as well. That's my favorite. It's the one that I've used for years. I've tried a lot of different ones. YNAB, you need a budget, is what it stands for. If you're really detail oriented, like you want all the bells and whistles, and you want to the penny type of tracking, if you're that kind of person, that's the one for you. Okay, it's pretty robust. Rocket Money is a really good one. It's got a good app. Monarch as well. Most of those are paid. It's maybe about $10 a month, $15 a month, somewhere in that realm, but well worth it. If you want an Excel spreadsheet, if you're I want to do it a little bit old school, I want to actually do it on an Excel spreadsheet, or I want to print something out, just let me know. I can get you one that's a good template, or you can just do a simple Google search. There's so many just budget templates. Find what works for you, but start tracking your money. Know where your money is going on a regular basis. And when you do that, you'll be amazed. Just the fact of just going through the last 3 months of your expenses, if you haven't done that in a while, you'll be like, oh, so I'm spending that much on restaurants, or that much on activities, or that, you'll be amazed what you find. Now, why does it matter how we spend our money? Well, just to remind ourselves from yesterday. Number one, God is the owner. You say, well, Nate, budgeting, I get it, but I'm not a money person. It's not really my thing, I've tried it before, it doesn't work. Listen, folks, this is not about what Nate is telling you to do. Nate's beating you over the head, get a budgeting app. This is important because God's the owner. Number two, we are the manager. Remember, this is a precious gift. This is a precious resource that God has given to us. If we're just taking this attitude of, I don't know, I just kind of, when things come up, I spend the money and I just hope there's enough left over. That's not being a good manager. And then number three, we will give an account. There's responsibility. There's accountability to this. So if we're going to give an account to God for how we use his money, and we're not tracking it in the first place, that's not a good combo. All right, so let's talk about how do you calculate your live score. All right, really your live is your basic spending in your needs and wants. Okay, needs and wants. What are needs? I'll give you some examples. Groceries, need. Housing, need. Although I would put housing in the O category, so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Like utilities, maybe your phone, water, electricity, clothes, going to the doctor. Okay, although maybe in Australia that's not as big of a big of a thing as far as a budget item. Okay, but needs. Then wants. Okay, well that should be pretty easy to figure out. Okay, wants are the things that you want to do but you don't have to do. So restaurants or activities or entertainment, the subscriptions, those would be wants. Nice to have, but you don't have to have them. So how do you figure out your live score? Add up your needs, add up your wants. If you're I don't know how much that is, look at your last 3 months of transactions. Pull out the bank statement, pull out the credit card statement, and just look. Find them, add them up. Here's about how much I'm spending each month. And then figure out what that is for the year, okay? So if it's $2,000 a month for needs and $1,000 a month for wants, that's $3,000 a month, $36,000 a year. Divide it by our income of $100,000, and what does that give us? Well, let's say that's a 36%, okay? So if it's $3,000 a month on our wants and needs, then our live score is at 36%. You following with me on how that works, okay? So how do we improve our live score? Now, this is the toughest category because it's the catch-all category. There's so many things that fit in our live score. Let me give you a few practical ways to help you. First of all, start budgeting and tracking one of those tools. Okay, so if you're not tracking, get one of those and start using it. Secondly, plan out your food and activity spending in advance. I'll tell you right now, I'm not a big spender. I'm just not. But the one area that I do like to always spend money on is going out to eat. I don't like to get a whole lot of things for myself, but when the opportunity presents itself, I love to go out to eat. And that's fine. And maybe that's you. Just set a limit for yourself. Okay, that's fine. If that's important to me, put it in my budget. Here's how much I'm going to spend each month, and stick to it. Because what I'll find is that when I don't do that, I'll just spend, and then I'll look at the end of the month. I'm like, yeah, I probably spent, maybe $500 this month on going out to eat. And then I look at the actual expenses, and you'll be amazed. I've had this happen to me, and I've had this happen with plenty of people that I've talked to. We always underestimate our own spending. So have a limit. Number 3, cancel unused subscriptions. Have you noticed everything's a subscription these days? Okay, look through your subscriptions. What have you not been using? Just go ahead and cut them out. If you've got stuff that's like, wow, I've got this Netflix subscription, I haven't watched anything in 3 months. Okay, then cancel it. Number 4, space out new purchases. Here's what I mean by that. You may need new shoes. You may need a new phone. You may need a new computer. Or you maybe just want those things. And your phone is fine. You just want to upgrade to the new whatever, right? So sometimes by saying, hey, I can do with another year of not upgrading my phone. I can do with a few more months of wearing these shoes. Like, space out your purchases a little bit more. And then number 5, I love this one, use the 24-hour rule. So for you, and figure out where your line is, depending on kind of your income and your stage of life, the line might be a little bit different. But like, for instance, like any expense over $100, I'm going to use the 24-hour rule. What is that? It just means I'm going to sleep on it. Like, so for instance, like especially with really big purchases, right? If you're thinking about buying something that's $500, you can really work yourself up into it. You ever been here before where you're like, I really want it, and I've got it in the cart on the computer, and I'm ready to click buy? Okay, instead of clicking buy, leave it in the cart for 24 hours, and then come back to it. And if you still feel like, yes, no, I do want to move forward with it, okay, then. But you'll be amazed sometimes how you just kind of get yourself worked up in the moment. You just you see the outfit, and you're like, oh, that would look so good. And you're just like, bye, right? But then if you waited a little bit and then come back to the next day, be like, actually, no, it's okay. I don't need it. That will save you on some impulse spending right there, okay? So just some practical ways to help on the live score. Okay, let's move to O. All right, what is O? O is made up of our debt and our taxes. Debt and taxes. O is the things that we have to pay. There's really no getting around those. So debt and taxes. Is it wrong to be in debt? Well, the Bible does not say that going into debt is wrong. It just says that it's dangerous. Okay. You look at the Old Testament, God gave the Israelites rules about borrowing and lending within their society. If it was a wrong thing to do, God wouldn't have given them rules on how to go about doing it. You just have to be very careful. There's a lot of warnings in the Bible about the dangers of debt. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemy in our finances. Sometimes the reason that we can't go to that next level is because we've put too much in that O category, and it's crowding out all the other stuff, right? And this is especially true in your younger years because this is when you're most likely to take on larger debts, whether it's student loans or whether that's credit cards or whether that's a car loan or whether that's a mortgage. And so you got to be really, really careful about entering into debt. Here's a great quote. If your outflow exceeds your income, then your upkeep will be your downfall. If your outflow exceeds your income, your upkeep will be your downfall. If you start spending more than you make, your standard of living is going to be what keeps you back from financial success. Learn to live below your means. Learn to live below your income. Learn to not have to have everything now. This is and I don't know how it is in Australia and New Zealand. In America, this is a very real thing that's happening, and that is a lot of young people want to have the life that their parents have right now. But their parents have been working for 30 years and been saving and building up their income. And that's why they live in the house that they live in, and that's why they drive the car, and that's why they go on the vacation that they do. But then young people kind of feel, well, I got to have that right now. And they feel this pressure, and they look on Instagram, they look at where other people are going, what other people have. They're like, I got to have it right now. No, you don't. In fact, if you'll say no to having some of those things now, you'll be able to say yes to much better things later on. So be very careful about that lifestyle creep. And that's a very real thing. You ever heard that term, lifestyle creep? when your income starts to go up, what naturally happens? Ooh, I can go out to some nicer restaurants now. Oh, now I can finally afford that car that I've had my eye on. Now I can move into a nicer home. Now I can buy some nicer clothes. And as income goes up, our standard of living and our spending just continues to increase in proportion. Be very careful about that. Okay, so on this idea of number one, debt is not a sin, but it is a burden. Debt is not a sin, but it is a burden. The Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender. Taking on debt is like putting on a backpack. You ever gone on a long hike? Put on a backpack, and at first it's like, yeah, I got this. I feel good. Charged up, let's go. And then you get down a little ways, and you're like, man, shoulders start to get a little bit sore. And then you're halfway through the hike, and you're like, this was a bad choice. I put way too much stuff in this backpack. This is not going to end well, right? That's what debt does. At first, it doesn't seem that bad. I got this. I can handle it. It'll be all right. I'll make more money. Whatever we tell ourselves. But pretty soon, if we overload ourselves with debt, it will become a burden that sometimes we're not even able to bear. So it's not wrong, but we have to be very careful. Then number two, on this area of taxes, we need to pay taxes and obey every law that doesn't contradict God's word. Americans are very funny about taxes. We're very anti-tax in America. It's kind of part of our founding. Listen, the Bible says to obey the higher powers. Obey them that have the rule over you. Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Pay your taxes, okay? Now be smart about it if you can. If there's rules and laws that are on the books that allow you to minimize your taxes, by all means, use what's available to you, but it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's something that we're called to do as Christians. And so let's not have this attitude of, I'm always getting ripped off, or I'm going to try to definitely don't try to do tax evasion. Pay your taxes, be smart about it, try to avoid debt at all costs. And there's a difference. Yeah, you ever heard the difference between good debt and bad debt? People have different definitions. But generally what I would say is good debt is borrowing on something that will pay a greater return later. So for instance, if you get a mortgage on a house, okay, that might be an example of good debt because the value of that house is likely to increase over time. Getting a business loan might be a good debt because it allows you to invest in a business that is going to grow to a much greater valuation than the loan that you took in the first place. Or maybe even a student loan in the investment in your education, what that leads to later on. Maybe an example of bad debt would be getting debt on something that's going to depreciate in cost over time. Like, for instance, a car loan, right? Because you understand when you buy a vehicle, that goes down over time. That's a depreciating asset. So you're borrowing for something that's going to be worth less in the future than it is today. So be careful about what you choose to go into debt for and to what extent. All right, let's see here. Practical steps on your O score. So and then how do you determine your O score? Just like the others, how much are you paying in taxes each year? How much are you paying in debt? Add those both up. Let's say it was, I think in my example here, I think we had $3,500 a month. That's $42,000 a year. So let's say your O score was 42%. So let's put that there for O score. Ways to improve your O score. If you're in debt, especially if you're in credit card debt, okay, the best return on your money is to pay that off. Think about this. What if I told you there's this great investment out there that pays a guaranteed 20% or 25%? You're like, ooh, that sounds great. Which super fund is that? That's paying off your credit card. If you've got a credit card that's 20, 25, I don't know what it is. And again, I'm sorry for not always knowing the exact equivalent in Australia. In America, 20, 25%, that's very typical for credit card interest. Paying that off, you're saving yourself that 20 to 25%. It's the equivalent of making that return on your money. So use the debt avalanche or the debt snowball. There's two different ways you can go about this. They're pretty similar. They're going to get you to the same place, just about the same. Here, let me explain it really quickly. Let's say you have 3 credit cards right now. The debt avalanche, which is typically what I would recommend, says start paying extra on the one that has the highest interest rate. So pay the minimum on the other 2, put as much as you can on the one with the highest interest rate, and then get that paid off. And then once you do, then take what you were paying on the highest one and put it on the next highest one. Debt snowball is a little bit different. It says start with the lowest amount that you owe. So if you got 3 credit cards and one's $500 and the other 2 are $5,000, you start with the $500. Either way, you're going to get to the same place about the same time frame. Debt avalanche is a little bit better, pay you off a little bit quicker, and pay a little bit less interest. But the point is, you have to have a strategy. You have to be intentional, because if you're just like, yeah, I got to pay the credit cards off, I got to get out of debt, I'll just do my best. Remember, smart. You have to have a smart goal and a way to attack it. Refinance your loans if you can. Sometimes that's a good way to get out of debt quicker. Have an emergency fund. This is a really big one. This is really, really important, okay? If you get nothing else from this session, have an emergency fund. Things will go wrong, and they will go wrong at the worst possible time. What do I mean by emergency fund? I mean cash that you've set aside that's like a buffer, a separate savings account with money, at least 3 months of your expenses. So if you spend $3,000 a month, $9,000 as an emergency fund. If you are in more of like a sales type of job or self-employed where income fluctuates more, you want to be more like 6 months worth of expenses. This is what's going to happen. The car is going to break down. You're going to have some kind of medical emergency. There's going to be some kind of family emergency where you have to go to a funeral and you got to buy a plane ticket. There's going to be, everything's going to go wrong at the worst possible time, and all those things are going to hit you. And if you don't have money set aside, then what are you going to do? Then you're going to pull out the credit card. Then you're going to have to go to a friend or a family member and say, hey, can I borrow money? Don't put yourself in that position. Have an emergency fund. Don't co-sign. I don't really have time to get too far into that. That just means, guaranteeing somebody else's loan. Don't do that. Don't put yourself on the hook for somebody else. Only borrow for appreciating assets. That's what I talked about before, things that will go up in value over time. Okay, we got to go quickly now because I want to, these glasses are here for a reason, so I want to get to that. All right, grow, your grow score. Don't save what's left after spending, spend what's left after saving. That's what Warren Buffett said, probably the most famous American investor. Save first. Don't wait until the end of the month to see if you got money left over. What does the Bible say about saving? The Bible has a lot to say on this. Number one, it's wise to prepare for the future. Do you know the Bible says that? The Bible does say to have faith and to trust God to provide. The Bible also does say it's wise to prepare for the future. There is treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise. The wise man puts money, puts fuel, oil. That's what they used to light their lanterns back in those days. He sets aside stuff for the future just in case. It's wise to prepare for the future. Number two, it's wise to be disciplined. Saving takes discipline. Investing takes discipline. It's not easy. It means foregoing something now so that you can have something later. Remember the proverb about the ant? Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. What does the ant do? Does the ant need somebody looking over its shoulder, telling it what to do? No, it intuitively understands, I got to work really, really hard in the summer to store up food so that we will survive the winter. The Bible says we need to learn from that. Be like the ant and be disciplined to save while you have the opportunity for later. Remember Joseph in Egypt, how God gave him the interpretation of the dream? Hey, save 20% of the food for the next 7 years because a famine's going to come that's going to last 7 years. And that's what he did, and the country survived, and Pharaoh got very rich in that process because he planned ahead and saved 20%. Number three, it's wise to make your money work for you. It's wise to make your money work for you. Put your money to work. Invest it. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, he talks about in Ecclesiastes 11 about the power of diversifying. He says, basically, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Divide your money into different portions because you never know what might go wrong, right? So don't put all your money in just one thing and be like, this is going to be it, right? I'm going to sink or swim on this. In Proverbs 31, we read about the virtuous woman and all the different qualifications or qualities that she has. One of them is that she's an entrepreneur. She has a good business sense. She looks for opportunities to make income. She looks for opportunities to invest. So these are good things that the Bible encourages us to do. How do we calculate our growth score? Well, what are you saving for? Add up your retirement contributions. Any short-term, that's like putting money in savings. Any other type of savings, whether it's for education or that sort of thing. And add up all your savings. And let's say, in this case, let's say that this person is saving $1,000 a month, and so $12,000 a year, and let's say that their growth score is 12%. Now, I want you to notice something about these numbers, okay? Who's our math major here who spotted what do all these numbers add up to here? Who can do the quick math? 100. It will always add up to 100. If it doesn't add up to 100, you've done the numbers wrong, okay? All of your money, 100%, goes into one of these 4 buckets, and I would encourage you to look at your own finances and figure out best you can what what your scores are for those. Practical ways to increase your grow rate: automate your contributions, just like giving. Just set it and forget it. Automate it. Get full retirement account match for your employer. That's more of an American thing. I understand in Australia, the employer is going to put money in your super just automatically already. But hey, if you can put some money of your own, then great, do it. Systematically increase contributions. So you say, hey, I can only do 3% of my pay right now. Okay. Then next year, try to bump it up to 5%. Okay. Gradually increase as you're able to. Set a target saving percentage for additional income. In other words, I'm going to try to save 15% of my income. Good. So when I start a side hustle and I start making money from that, I'm going to save 15% of that money too. And when I get a raise, I'm going to save 15% of that money too. I'm going to continue to do it in proportion. And then replace unnecessary spending with, and then it cut off there, so sorry about that, with saving. So in other words, here's what I mean by that. Go through your expenses. You're like, I don't have any money to save, Nate. Like, I don't know where I'm going to find this money. Go through your expenses. Find the stuff that you're like, yeah, I could cut that out. I don't need that subscription. I don't need to be spending that much. And then take that money and then move it to savings. Oh, I found $50 worth of subscriptions I don't use. Great. Now start saving $50 a month. See what I'm saying? So move things from here over to there. Okay, I'm going to try to do this with the microphone as well. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to go over here and get my very well-hidden object lesson. You'll notice this is why I did not have it out, because I knew you guys would be staring at the peanut M&Ms the entire time. Let's let this represent the buckets, and I want to show you something here. Spread these out a little bit, okay? Okay, so these are going to represent, this is going to represent our income. I'll try to do this with the microphone as well. So this is going to represent our income, right? Here is how most people go about putting money into these various buckets. They will rearrange these things. They'll take this and they'll put it over here, and they'll take this and they'll put it over here, and they'll go about it in this order. So they take their income, and first thing they do is they pay what they owe. Well, taxes, okay, that comes out right at the beginning. Okay, so those taxes. And then, well, my debt, my mortgage, and my credit cards, and my car loan, and all that comes out, and that's a pretty big chunk, and so I'm going to pay all that, okay, so that goes in. All right, now live. Now what my needs and my wants, I got to pay my bills, my phone bill and internet and utilities and all that, so that comes out here. And, well, then, I want to go out to some restaurants and go out with friends and do some of that stuff, so that comes out here. And then, okay, well, I don't really have a whole lot left over right now. Maybe I'll put a little bit in the savings over here, okay, if I can get one more M&M. Oh, whoops, okay. I'm going to take one M&M, and I'm going to maybe, I'll drop a, you get the point. Okay, I can't do this with one hand. I'll drop a 20 in the offering plate at church one time a month, and that's kind of how this goes. But next month will be better. Okay, I'll do better next month. So we refill this back up, and then here's what happens: we put all this back up, and the next month we go about it in the same order. We say, okay, I got to pay what I owe. Okay, taxes, and then all my payments, and got to do all that, okay? Well, now we're spending. I'm going to try to be better this month. I'm going to try to watch what I'm spending on these different things, and so I'm going to be a little bit more disciplined. Okay, great. I've got a little bit more left over, but then what happens? Oh, something unexpected came up. Oh, so-and-so's wedding. I've got to get a new outfit for that, okay? And then, there was an emergency. I forgot about this one. It's like a one-time payment. This is not like a regular thing, but it's just like a one-time thing that comes up, and I've got that this month. And, actually, I had to take the car to the shop, and so I've got to pay for that, and that's, okay, there's not really that much left over this month, so I'll put a little bit in savings, but, kind of the same old. And it happens over and over and over again, because every month is always a different reason. It's always a different excuse. Now, let me show you what else happens, okay? So let's say that represents our income. What happens when I get a raise, though, okay? What if all of a sudden now I'm getting a little bit more money? Okay, look at this. My income has gone up. So definitely now I'll certainly be able to grow and to give now, because right now I've got more money. So I go about it again. I owe, and taxes, and that goes in. But, I forgot because I'm making a little bit more now I can afford a better car payment. So there's a little bit more on the car payment for O, so there's a little bit more that goes in there. And then my live, okay, well, I'm doing all my regular needs and wants, but, I am going out to eat a little bit more because, hey, I can afford it now. And, I am going out shopping a little bit more, but it's okay because I'm making more money. And, whoops, I'm back to the same thing. Again, I don't really have all that much left to go into grow or to give. You see where I'm going with this, okay? The problem is the order. The problem is the priority. The problem is we're not looking at our financial why statement. We're just kind of reacting to what's happening in the moment. So let me just show you something. Here's what I'm going to finish with, and if we have a few minutes, we'll take some questions, okay? And if you get nothing else from this session, here's what I want you to remember. Instead of going in this order, people typically, they'll owe and live, and they'll grow and give if they can. Instead, here's what we need to do. Give and grow before you live and owe. Okay, can you remember that? Give and grow before you live and owe. What am I going to give? Oh, I'm going to give 10%. That's an automatic. I've already set that up. That happens without me even thinking about it, okay? That goes there. Oh, grow? Oh, I've already got that set up. That comes out of my paycheck. That's an automatic transaction that goes from my checking to my savings account each month. I'm saving 12%. Here it is, okay? Well, now I pay my bills. Oh, okay, taxes, my payments, okay, I've got to make those. Those are non-negotiable, okay? And now, here's what I have left over to live. So now, I can pay all my utilities and my bills, but I've got money left over to have fun and do the things that I like and enjoy my hobbies. And guess what's great about it? There's no guilt. I can enjoy it. I'm not worried. There's no pressure on me. I've given, and I've saved, and I've paid what I need, and all this, now I get to enjoy. Because when people do it in the opposite order, they're constantly stressed. They're constantly worried. They're constantly thinking, should I be doing this right now? Did I spend too much at the store? Should we be doing this? Should we be going out with friends right now? And they're just constantly feeling this anxiety and this stress around their money because they don't know how it's going to turn out. But when you flip it around and you give and you grow so that you can then live and owe, it frees you up to be able to enjoy this category at the end and not constantly feel that pressure. Do you see how that works? Isn't that a great thing? So I really hope that you'll start to use that framework. Remember, one-page financial plan. Financial why statement, SMART goals, and figure out how much is going into these categories. If you'll do those three things, I'm telling you, it will help you immensely and it will set you up for a much better financial future.